very good in one area and not in other areas, especially the spiritual area. So those are some of the thoughts about being out of balance, because your balance comes from having your feet firmly planted on the ground, having your spirituality firmly grounded in your ancestors and your traditions and your culture. And so if you get away from that, what do you have to fall back on when disappointments come, when you hit the glass ceiling, when you're discriminated against on the job, when you're fired for no reason of your own except the fact that you're African American or you're black, or somebody just didn't like you that day? It may not have anything to do with what you look like and what type of person you are. They just came into the job and was going to fire somebody, and you was the first person they saw. But you don't know that. And so you blame yourself. And you begin to beat yourself up. And you begin to think of all the negative things that people have said to you down through the years, because you don't have that cultural and spiritual foundation to prop yourself up and say, you know what, I'm a child of the king, or, you know, I'm this or I'm that, and I'm going to stand in this, that I didn't have anything to do with this. This is somebody else's doing, and I need to remember that when one door closes, another door opens. When we get away from those things, we leave the door open to abuse ourselves. And that's not even talking about people who have developed down through the years fractured personality because of whatever turmoil or trauma took place when they were young, that left a void, that left a question, that did not affirm who they were as a person. One of the things that spirituality does, especially indigenous spirituality, when it's done correctly, it affirms who we are as people. It affirms why we exist. Why are we here? Yes, I'm a good singer. I'm a good performer, but I'm a spiritual person first, and I have that first mandate to fulfill, and this other stuff isn't quite important or quite as important as my spirituality. So you don't fall prey to self-abuse, self-deprecation, to looking at others as better, or allowing others to basically take your manhood or your womanhood.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So a couple of things on that. I mean, I'm seeing the connection with approaching mental health from that perspective of spiritual disconnect, and also each person then is approaching this healing modality from their own spiritual and cultural perspective, because we know not everyone follows African spirituality who is African or considered African American, or, you know, people of color or Latino, whatever you are. Mm-hmm. So looking at this modality of dealing with mental health, then, you know, I'm working through this and working with what you're saying. So then it's important that each person that you or someone would work with will have to then say, have to have some kind of understanding of this person's culture and their spiritual upbringing, and having them to tap into that. Am I on the right track with feeling what you're saying here?
Most definitely. most definitely. Anytime we talk about mental health, substance abuse, diseases of the mind, body, and spirit, when we look at it holistically, we have to look at what cultural values or what cultural mechanisms exist. And one of the things that's important is, at least from a therapeutic perspective, is for the practitioner or the clinician to ask. Because even within the African American culture, I can go to a therapist and say, well, I'm Yoruba. Somebody else might come in and say they're Akan. Somebody else might come and say, well, I grew up on a reservation and I'm Native American. My spirituality is Native American, but you don't look Native American. Well, my grandparents are from this area and I grew up on a reservation here, and so that's what I learned coming up. So you can't look at someone and assume that even within cultures, there's plenty of information out there within the Native American community where many have integrated and have no connection to their tribe, their people, their indigenous culture.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so, in order to help them, you have to understand that maybe there are some things within their culture. And this is the exciting part about the work that I do. Let's go there. Let's go there. Let's get you some education about where you came from, who your people are, and how they survived, what they survived, and what they do on a daily basis to affirm themselves as indigenous people. And that, to me, is one of the most exciting aspects of the work that I do, because I get to learn as they grow, as they take on new things. And so now you have this whole thing, this New Age spirituality movement, which isn't necessarily tied to any one culture. And so what do? Is that an asset, or is that a liability for those that practice it? And I think one of the things that, from my understanding of New Age, it doesn't not allow you to take it where you need it to go. And it doesn't prescribe to any one particular culture.
Uh-huh.
So if a person was interested or involved in New Age, it doesn't stop them from delving into other aspects of their being. Whereas some old age, I don't know what we would call more traditional Eurocentric religions, tell you, no, you can't do that. Even though you might be Irish, East Indian, and African American, if you prescribe to Catholicism, everything outside of Catholicism is damned or is not acceptable in God's eyes. And so a person is denying their own development if they ascribe to that. And so the New Age is kind of saying, you know what, if a person needs to experience or go and develop that aspect of themselves, they should be able to do that. They should be able to use what's available to them in the spirit realm to assist them in a higher consciousness, a higher spiritual consciousness. And so I think that's one aspect of New Age that I can appreciate. But the aspect that I have some trouble with is its actual lack of cultural connection. Because if you have someone that doesn't know their culture then they're missing out on the beauty and the power of those ancestral as well as culturally specific forces that exist in the spirit world.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. It's, I wanted to piggyback on that because for some people, and, I'm talking a lot about African American because, I can identify with African American as an African American person. But, we have some people in the African, or I'll say Africana. I like to say Africana because that then deals with everyone everywhere that is of African descent. So here in America, we have people in the Africana community that some subscribe to, practice, and live Yoruba Khan traditions and some other continental traditions. But then we also have people who, like you were saying earlier, who are Catholic or Southern Baptist or something of that nature that do not deal with that. And so looking at healing people with mental illnesses or mental issues from a culture perspective, I think is really important for people to understand that everyone has a culture. Even the African American community has a culture, which is an African American culture. And so it's important, in my perspective, to understand that as a reality, because so many times, and then of course approach that individual from that perspective as well. I think part